code 1000.
And this week, it's the week about creating the perfect work environment. And one of those things that you need to know, I know we've got a lot of listeners that are contemplating making some changes, probably based on J.B. Bricato's advice about finding the perfect work environment, something that you're happy at. They might be contemplating moving to a new firm, going to a new job, and there's a lot of things they need to keep in mind. That's why we're talking with Ira Piltz, who is an attorney in Skokie. Ira, thanks for joining us on Get Down to Business.
Hi, good evening, Shalom. How are you?
Fantastic. So, Ira, what things should somebody keep in mind before they sign their life away?
Well, and first, let me just start with a general disclaimer. Anything that we discuss is in the category of general advice and conversation.
Oh, a true lawyer. A true lawyer.
No, you gotta do it. It's the devil is in the details, as they say. But nothing that we discuss should be considered to be any sort of individual advice. And I would always encourage, the first thing I would tell anybody before signing a new employment agreement or any sort of agreement is that they should contact an attorney who has expertise in the area in which they're looking to sign an agreement. And I just think that's good general advice for anything. With regard to making a change, the first thing I would caution people is that the words employment contract get tossed around a lot. And in Illinois, at least, there's a huge difference between the concept of an employment contract and an employment agreement. In Illinois, we're what's called an at-will employment state, meaning that generally, other than for reasons that would violate state or federal law, somebody can be hired and fired at will. The law recognizes that, and there's actually case law both in Illinois and in the Seventh Circuit, which is our federal circuit, which discusses this and the difference specifically between an at-will employment agreement and an employment contract. An employment agreement might take the form of an engagement letter. You might see an engagement letter, an employment offer. There's different names and nomenclatures that you may see on such an agreement. But understand that that agreement defines the terms under which you've agreed to work, but it doesn't necessarily create contractual rights. An employment contract is like a contract for anything else, that it follows the contract formalities, and the courts hold that an employment contract can only be terminated pursuant to the terms of how a contract can be terminated, and it's often defined inside the contract, and that if a contract is breached, the party who was breached against would have a right to damages, just like any contract being breached. So the first thing I would tell somebody is take a look and see what you've got. Do you have a contract that spells out specific things, or do you have an employment agreement, which means you have the right to work, but you also can be fired like any other employee?
And obviously, as you said, Ira, people should consult an attorney before signing on the dotted line. I could already hear Bruce Leon, our mutual friend, saying the advice that probably has nothing to do with the legal ramifications, but Bruce always says that when you recruit an employee or when you sign an employment contract, keep in mind, you have to think about the short term and the long term. You have to make sure that your employees will be happy in the job. So often people are looking for multiple jobs at the same time, and if you don't create the right environment, if you come off too rigid, you might scare somebody off. So clearly, consult an attorney. Don't sign on the dotted line. Don't just sign away the next 15 years of your life because it sounds like the dream job right now.
And that is very true advice. And as a matter of fact, I saw Bruce earlier today, and when I mentioned to him I'd be on your show, we were discussing it briefly. And, the truth is Bruce's organization, Tandem, I think does an amazing job at this, at counseling the companies that they work with and the employees of those companies on understanding exactly what it is. And I think that's where, just as an attorney who works with both employers and employees and organizations like Tandem, that's where I think the value in an organization like Tandem is that somebody coming in to work for a Tandem client really knows what they're getting. This is what they're doing. This is what they can expect. This is what they're expected to do. And I think out of many of the companies I've dealt with, Tandem is phenomenal at doing that. I think it's one of their true talents.
That's for sure. What else does the law office of Ira Piltz handle?
So we handle, our office it's what they call a general practice. My specialty is as an attorney. And again, the word specialty, again, one of those geek lawyer things. No lawyer can consider themselves a quote-unquote specialist other than in the area of admiralty, maritime, and intellectual property. The areas in which I have a lot of experience really has to do with all forms of contract law, whether it's dealing with employer-employee contracts, real estate contracts, commercial litigation. It's just an area that I've enjoyed for many years. I will say one other thing that relates to what we talked about. If I can just jump back for a second, I think It's also important, Shalom. One of the things that I've been seeing, both in terms of with my clients over the past few years and just in some of how various trends in the law have come through the courts and how people are reflecting them in various types of agreements. Since the downturn in 2008, a lot of companies have turned inward and really looked at the kinds of benefits they've provided. And especially with the Affordable Care Act and other changes in the law, the idea of benefits often becomes a huge, huge issue. Now, there's a couple of very important legal ramifications that people want to bear in mind.
We've got about 1 minute remaining.
Okay. So the biggest thing is to remember that, number one, let's say you have an employment agreement or even a contract in place. If your employer is going to change the terms of the employments they're going to offer, if you have a contract, there has to be some consideration. A lot of courts a lot of people have argued, and I think it's a good practice for employers and employees to remember, is even if it's an employment agreement, if you're going to make a change in somebody's benefits, you're going to change their hours, you're going to change their health plan, you should offer some sort of consideration. So if you're an employer, you need to think about that. If you're an employee, you need to talk to an attorney or somebody in HR to say, okay, you're changing this benefit from me. What do I get in return? What's my
always consult an attorney. That's why we're talking with our good friend Ira Piltz of Piltz Law. You can email him, Ira, at piltzlaw.com. And after the break, I'm going to be sharing some tips about business travel. You won't want to miss a minute of it. Ira, your telephone number?
847-674-3500.
You're listening to Get Down to Business.